Joining Carl today is guest host Yaro Tsyhanenko as they discuss whether Bolt could take on Uber in North America, what the Nvidia and Yum brands partnership means for restaurants, and they'll look through the latest findings in Q's State of Digital report. That's all ahead on this week's Digital Restaurant.
Happy Monday. We're back here at the Digital Restaurant, and it's a time for a new guest host. I am thrilled to have Yaro here, who, if you haven't met Yaro before, he's the founder of PickPad, good Ukrainian friend of mine. You've been over here for a little bit, but you've been building multiple companies in our industry, right, Yaro? And I think one of the things I'm really interested in, and we'll hopefully get some time towards the end today, is to learn a bit more about PickPad and how you're trying to make the pickup experience a little bit better. But you have been at many conferences. We've run into each other a few times, and I know you're always a keen fan of hearing and keeping up to tab with everything going on in the industry. So it makes perfect sense why you're here with me today. But welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks a lot, Carl. And yeah, excited to join you today.
All right, well, we're going to kick it off because you have the first question. This story is a little old. It's been around for a few weeks now because obviously when Yum starts to talk about working with one of the biggest tech companies that, of course, are having one of the largest surges in stock prices I've seen in recent years, Nvidia, we've got to ask, what's going on here? Why has Yum partnered up with Nvidia, and how is this going to make a difference to the end consumer? What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, sure. Interesting news. So Yum Brands partners with Nvidia to accelerate AI technology across its global system. So the partnership will initially focus on three key areas: voice AI, computer vision, and restaurant intelligence. For me, this news is not just about partnership between two incredible companies. It's probably more about milestone that shows the industry trajectory, because this industry is moving super fast towards digital. And I believe the majority of all transactions will be digital very soon. And the tech stack for every brand is becoming the main asset. And I believe that fast food, fast casual beverage brands are moving from being restaurant companies to tech companies. And for me, Yum Brands is just a great representation of this moment. And it's incredibly interesting. They recently announced that they reached 50+% of digital orders. And to support this growth, they started to build and invest in their internal ecosystem of products. And recently they announced that they have their internal operational system, which is called Byte. And now they control the entire service layer that processes all orders and payments and data and more. And it was just the missing part in this story, which is infrastructural level. And that's where Nvidia comes as a reliable infrastructural partner, providing not just only solutions, but of course, I believe cybersecurity things and scalability as well. And they plan to roll out this solution in 500 restaurants across all Yum Brands locations in Q2. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. What do you think, Carl?
Yeah, it is a fascinating partnership, and of course, yeah, I think it's the first of many. Quite honestly, Yara, I think we'll see plenty more of these in the years to come. I had dinner with someone in the technology management team there a couple of weeks back, and I think the fact that they're working with folks that are technology companies that actually understand not just where we are today, but also where the puck is heading, to use the Wayne Gretzky phrase, that idea of being able to be with someone that can help them on the journey, given how much change is happening in this space right now, is super important. But I still think, even as I reflect back on that conversation, how much they have got it all sorted in their own mind. I mean, for me, a lot of this is actually about data, right? And being able to get data architecture into a right place. And I think the reason for Nvidia is also about the level of compute at the site level, right? The ability for you to be able to run a lot of the models that all these AI kind of capabilities can drive for you, but doing it at a site level as well, that can actually make and help the site manager have better decisions on their day-to-day business. You often hear AI referenced to things like voice AI and drive-through, but the third part around how do we help inform better decision-making at site level, that's the thing that I think is going to be particularly encouraging. And in many ways, the consumer won't necessarily see any of that. It will be happening in the background, but if you can arm your GMs with better insights, You can get them to create a better store environment for their team initially, and then of course to their customers as well. So yeah, really interesting. And as I say, the first of many, I suspect.
Let's move to the next topic. The new State of Digital 2025 report was just released by Q. And what was the most interesting part of this report for you, Carl?
I've got to bring it up. I think that's the best way to take us through the report. We have often talked about this particular report. They always do a great job over at Q, and thank you again to Jen Kern for sharing it with me, because I think there are numerous different insights on this. First of all, whenever I reference a survey, I should tell you who did they survey. 170 enterprise brands, all with 20 or more units. But basically that covered something like 85,000 restaurant locations. And crucially, 88% of those responses came from executives, VPs, and owners, meaning the insights, I think, reflect strategic priorities and not just tactical observations. Let's go through to slide 5 here. So as you can see, the main one where it talks about first-party ordering being the number one revenue growth priority. So let's unpack what that really means. For me, it's not just about having a branded app or website. It's about owning the full guest relationship. It means more direct data, better personalization, and fewer fees shaved off the top by aggregators. And it means building sticky experiences that bring people back because you control that ecosystem. And so I think the shift is both a digital and economic strategy, and a signal that the battle for margin and long-term value is being fought at the ordering interface. Let's go to slide 8 here. What was interesting for me about this particular slide was it was talking about operational efficiencies and the way in which the future of AI and innovation is being shaped in terms of prioritization. And look at number 2 here, Yaro. We just mentioned this a moment ago. Data orchestration showing up on number 2. It's not really surprising to me, but what's interesting is how it's been framed as a tool for operational efficiency, not growth. And obviously on a day-to-day basis now, I'm talking about a lot of AI capabilities out there with restaurants and retailers and hospitality providers. And I often say, look, yes, of course, AI can drive operational efficiency, but it's a narrow lens. If you shift the framing from efficiency to top-line enablement, I think that becomes a big transformation driver. In fact, you think of any big digital change over the last 20, 30 years, when you affect revenue, you obviously get more momentum and bigger levels of change and typically more investment as well. So if your systems are orchestrated and your data is unified, which I think is the point of the slide, you're not just improving your workflows, you're enabling personalization at scale and more profitable marketing and a better customer segmentation. All of that points to revenue. And this is a growth engine hiding under the ops umbrella. Let's touch on slide 14. I was talking here about just the different ways in which investments are being applied across different types of technology. And of course, all the kind of main names are on there as you would expect. But in the text, I thought was interesting where they talked about the fact that CDP and data investments are up 11% and are actually poised to outpace loyalty investments, which are down 8% year on year. So I think that it suggests that brands are waking up to the fact that loyalty without unified data isn't loyalty. It's just a discount program. And we'll probably touch more on that as we get into a question later as well. And then what else? Slide 26. I'm not going to go through each one of them, but the biggest challenges with digital ordering, really interesting. The usual suspects. Order accuracy is there. Throttling coming up again. But 2 things stood out. Menus not syncing across systems, ranked number 3. That's a massive red flag for guest experience and kitchen execution. And then on that order throttling, or where employees are turning off digital orders, is that a symptom of operational stress? It's a signal, I think, that tech adoption is outpacing operational readiness, and that real gap between the technology and the operational readiness really needs to be managed in a way to reduce the friction. And then finally, fast casual surpasses QSR in digital adoption. The stat that really stood out to me was actually the one before it here. 10% of fast casual brands now have over half their sales that are digital. That's not a fringe number anymore. That just goes to show the amount of digital orders coming into these more progressive brands and progressive category types. It signals, I think, the emergence of digitally native behaviors inside legacy models. And I think as fast casual moves faster than QSRs, we're going to see even more momentum in that area. And so while QSRs lag in that particular share, if I go back to this representation, they're balancing it with the drive-through dominance, right? So QSRs, you have to balance it, I think, across those 2. So yeah, really interesting for me. Anything stand out for you on this particular report?
Yeah, for me, the interesting part was this list of priorities in terms of tech stack. And while there are a lot of buzz around new technologies like AI and voice recognition and computer vision and robotics, the industry is still in transition to this basic foundational tech implementation. So I believe that we have to take into consideration this long cycle of technology adoption by the industry. And while talking about a lot of innovations and futuristic things, we have to still think about basics.
All right, let's move on. Oh, wow, look at this. My good friend Meredith is in the news again. More impersonally, her former company is in the news with Empower, now joining the ranks of Starbucks. Tell us about this one.
As we all know, Starbucks is going through the process of changes, and this strategy is focused on re-establishing Starbucks as a community coffee house and elevating customer experience. And I think that this timing is perfect, and consumption patterns are changing, and now people have more ways to order than ever before: online, apps, OS AI. And while it's incredibly convenient for customers, it creates an absolutely new level of chaos and challenges for restaurants, specifically at the intersection of digital and physical worlds. And of course, it directly influences customer experience, customer attention. And it's not just a Starbucks problem. I believe it's a problem of many brands, but Starbucks has this problem on a scale, and the Starbucks just a victim of their digital sales success in the past, right? Because they just created this incredibly large channel of mobile orders. So now they are on a mission to fix customer experience in store while keeping mobile order experience better, faster, more convenient. I believe with right goals, targets, and technologies, they can do it. And in terms of the specific goals and targets, Starbucks has this 4-minute wait time rule for in-store orders. And according to Bloomberg, they already applied this rule for drive-through orders, and also they established 12-minute target from mobile order to pickup. And I believe Meredith shared on LinkedIn that Empower Delivery software is at its core a timing and coordination engine that gets the right product to the right person at the right time. And her team will focus on streamlining Starbucks' omni-channel operations, improving order-to-handoff speed in cafes and drive-thrus, and ensuring app customers receive their orders on time. So I believe with her expertise and incredible experience in both top restaurants and tech companies, it seems Meredith exactly knows what to do. And I'm looking forward to seeing changes, positive changes.
I kid you not. I mean, I'd say a year and a half ago, when speaking to Meredith, and I would say, well, who would be the most ideal number one client that you could have? And she said Starbucks. And you can understand why, right? Because of the amount of volume of orders and the fact that you have this challenge, as accurately represented in the article that I think was quoted, which is bringing order to mobile orders. And that is really what that system does. In many ways, it was ahead of its time, and startups and great ideas, they have to balance quite nicely with great timing as well. And I think what Starbucks have done here is to recognize, wow, this could actually be a differentiator for us. And yes, we could have procured their services, but isn't it better for us to bring it inside and actually have that competitive differentiation as well? So yeah, I'm super excited for the team. They've got some amazing engineers that they're bringing over as well.
So let's move to the next topic. And I'd love to start this topic with a question to you, Carl. How many absolutely irrelevant messages and emails do you receive from restaurants every day?
Oh, way too many, Yaro. Way too many. It's a good question. I think when I consider the way in which we communicate to our clients as an industry, we've got to think about how we do it in a better fashion. And right now, I think it's a problem. How about you?
Yeah, of course. I follow many brands, and I'm part of their loyalty programs. And of course, I receive a lot of messaging from them. And I wish they are more personalized. And I believe there's a room for improvement.
Totally. Well, I know the root of your question is actually in reference to Sam Danley's article on loyalty. In fact, our former host here, Olga, would have loved to have talked about this one because it's a really good article, and it's talking about how loyalty programs are evolving and why restaurants need to move beyond surface metrics, blind discounts, and like you say, some of these kind of measures which don't really lend themselves to personalization. Traditionally, brands have leaned on something called RFV, which is recency, frequency, and lifetime value. And they use those to assess loyalty. But those are retrospective metrics, right? They tell you what happened. They don't tell you what's actionable. And they don't really reveal how well your program is actually performing. Now, my good friend Zach Goldstein over at Thanks puts it, we live in a sea of data, but he argues that the focus should be on two core questions. One, what's the reach of your loyalty program? And two, how are you driving activation and retention? So let's just touch on a few of those for a moment. So reach, of course, is about how many customers you can actually communicate with because you know who they are. And a loyalty program can be beautifully designed, but if only a small fraction of your guests are participating, the impact's going to be minimal. Now, yes, you can take a Walgreens style approach and force signups to the register, but that doesn't really align with the restaurant guest experience. And so a better method, at least as argued in the article, is to use that first digital purchase as a moment to bring guests into the program, which is, of course, seamless and low friction from an onboarding perspective. Another good friend of mine, Olivia Ross over at El Perro Loco, breaks it down and she says, first, is there enough value in the program to get someone to sign up? And then second, is the process simple? Because no one wants a 10-step form, right? Make it fast, make it easy, and make it worthwhile. And of course, one major problem that I think exists out there right now is the anonymous guest checkout, especially online. And Zach in the article talks about this as saying, like, we're doing a disservice to our industry if we continue to route most of our digital orders through an anonymous checkout. When we think about brands like Uber, Amazon, DoorDash, they don't allow it. And they don't allow it because they understand the long-term value of the data. Just capturing loyalty member count isn't enough either. 1 million signups might sound pretty impressive, but if 85% never make a purchase, then what does it really mean, right? Who cares? So instead, the article goes on to talk about capture rate, and it says the percentage of total revenue tied to identifiable loyalty members is the number that really indicates how much of your business is influenced by known trackable behavior. And then Urvi Patel, who I interviewed at Food on Demand last year, she's over at Go-To Foods, she emphasizes that activation, given that second and third visit, is really where the relationship begins. And if customers sign up but don't return, then there's no relationship to build. And so there's this time sensitivity aspect to this whole thing. They quote the owner over at Emmy Squared Pizza, who says, get in the second visit, quickly boost the overall lifetime value exponentially. And so timing is everything. But this kind of comes back to what you're saying, right? So how do you boost those activation rates? And of course, one path is to reward quickly. Graham Humphreys over at the Culinary Edge says it best, I think, where he says, we're not very good as a nation at deferred gratification. Customers want to see progress now. The second thing, which is something I think we could learn a lot from I don't know how many games you play. You're probably too busy building your business, but how many games you play on your cell phone, right? Where you see the gamification, the chance for you to pay maybe an extra 99 cents, then $5 just to get a few extra lives or something. If you think that gamification angle and build some visible progress into your loyalty programs, people want to feel rewarded, not just after 10 purchases, the stamp process, that they want to feel rewarded along the way of that journey. And then once you've got someone past 3 visits, the focus at that point shifts to engagement. And that's where challenges, exclusive offers, Zach often talks about swag or hidden menus or early access to new items, or as I was at this Shop Talk conference last week where they were talking about Tom Holland, who's behind a particular brand. And for them, they were actually using their means of activating customers and rewarding them through an engagement where they can actually meet with Tom Holland, the founder. Right. So all of these things allows you to try and encourage and help people see why engagement is so important. And then the final piece of this jigsaw is retention, which is re-engaging customers who are at the risk of churning. And again, it's all about timely data-driven messaging. All right, well, last up this week, we're heading over back to a part of the world that we're more familiar with, Bolt, who have acquired a ride-hailing company over in Denmark. And got you thinking, didn't this, about how potentially this could impact us back home here?
Yeah, of course. So Bolt acquires a ride-hailing company in Denmark and begins to invade North America, starting from Canada. And talking about Bolt, it's a startup from a small, tiny European country, Estonia, and they operate in 50 countries in Europe, Asia, and Africa. And in 20 of them, they are number one player. Talking about their strategy, they are all about going to smaller markets, emerging markets, and becoming number one. And that's why their latest acquisition of number one Scandinavia's 100% electrical taxi is super logical. And talking about their numbers generally, I believe they are hoping for IPO next year, and they are in process of preparations, and this acquisition is part of this. And talking about their numbers, they generated $10 billion in transactions last year, with 2 billion plus in revenue, and their revenue structure is super simple. 80% is ride hailing, while micromobility and food delivery both take around 10%. So they are the biggest rival of Uber in Europe. And there's one more twist. They are going to go to North America, starting from Canada. And according to latest news, they started to hire drivers in Canada, in larger cities like Toronto. And their main point of differentiation is a driver fees. While Uber and Lyft take up to 35% of fees from drivers, they offer 15 to 20%, which is much lower. And I'm super curious to see how them can take some part of this market started from Canada. And of course, they are all about building ecosystem. So they will be adding micromobility and food delivery in Canada and then probably in the United States. And probably my biggest question to you, Carl, is there a room for one more ride-hailing company in Canada or in the US, and as well for one more food delivery player? What do you think?
I think this might be interesting for the folks over at Lyft to watch and see what happens there, right? Because they're a big company, Bolt, as you've rightly said. And so I wonder whether the way to come into this market, if indeed they plan to come into this market, will be through an acquisition strategy of Lyft. Because like you say, trying to disrupt a well-established duopoly in the ride-hailing space, at least itself, I think would be challenging. But if they can come in with all the expertise they have across each of those other areas, could be really interesting. And we wrote a chapter in the first book about what we can learn from Europe and Asia, if you recall. And one of the things that I often point towards is actually how those organizations that have come either from Asia or Europe initially have typically built themselves from a society that actually is a little bit more tech forward, and so therefore have had to build faster and grow features at a faster rate than perhaps we've seen over here. The whole experience of ride hailing and the whole experience of being able to have a better service could be a really interesting differentiator for them too. But Yaro, my goodness, we could keep on talking and cover another 10 articles. But before we go, I would, first of all, I've got to congratulate you. I'd love to say well done with regard to the award that you and the team were able to achieve recently. You'd have to tell us about that. But also, what is PickPad? What are you guys trying to do over there? And why should everyone be excited about you?
Yeah, of course. Thanks a lot, Carl. Yeah, we just got Martech Startup Alley Award, and it was a pleasure to present the solution during Martech and talking to many people working in this industry. And I'm really grateful for many angles on our product during the show. And talking about PickPad, so we are solving modern challenges in the restaurant industry at the intersection of digital and the physical worlds. We use sensors and machine learning to seamlessly upgrade any store's pickup area, make it smarter, to fix operational chaos and take the customer experience to the next level.
Amazing. And who would you say is your ideal customer right now?
Yeah, right now we are targeting fast food, fast casual beverage brands, and we have several slots open for great brands to start piloting this solution. And I am happy to talk more, and you can find me on LinkedIn. And of course, we have a website, which is pickpad.com.
Great stuff. Well, Yaro, thank you so much for joining me today on The Digital Restaurant. I'm sure everyone's been thrilled to get your perspectives on the latest effects in the worlds of restaurants and technology and off-premise. Look forward to seeing you soon at another conference. But if you have any questions, comments, or thoughts, then please put them in the comments below. And of course, please connect out to Yaro on LinkedIn as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
The Digital Restaurant Podcast is available for you to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Watch us
Rate us and subscribe to The Digital Restaurant on YouTube and follow along on all our social media digital restaurant channels. Thanks for listening.